Well, good afternoon and welcome one and all. Hopefully everything is set up and working okay. If not, if there are any issues, let me know down in the chat and we'll try and get those fixed. But otherwise, happy transfer deadline day to you all. Less than 3 hours to go now until the EFL window shuts at 7 o'clock, the slightly earlier time this year, usually kind of an 11, 12 o'clock kind of deadline, but it's 7 p.m. this year. So ahead of that, and at the end of what's been a very, very busy transfer window across the board, we're going to take a look back at the work that Chesterfield have done in this transfer window. They themselves had a very busy window, of course, missed out on promotion from League Two, losing in the playoffs to Walsall, who, as fate would have it, are their next opponents in the league. At least there is an EFL trophy game against Crow Alexandra coming up tomorrow night, but in the league, Walsall, the next opponent for Chesterfield. That was who knocked them out of the League Two playoffs. And now the challenge for Paul Cook and Co will be to avoid that particular route and try and go to the top three. And so far, it's so good. They're second in League Two after 6 games. We're going to take a look at some of the work that has enabled them to make that steady start and what they maybe might look to or might want to ideally add in the final few hours of this window. Up to yet, it's been a very quiet final day of the window for Chesterfield. They do typically tend to get a lot of their business done early. In fact, they definitely did when they won promotion from the National League a couple of seasons ago. And it does look like that's a blueprint they've tried to replicate a little bit this time around. So that's been pretty quiet up to yet in the kind of latter stages of this window. But if anything happens, we've got notifications on for all the relevant places that would usually break some of that news. We'll try and keep across anything if it breaks in the next hour or so, which we're going to do this live stream for. Not going to go right up to the 7 o'clock deadline. Unfortunately, I've got some things to do, but thought this was a good time to hop on, have a retrospective look at what Chesterfield have done so far, and then some of the final talking points that remain as we enter now, as we say, the final 3 hours of this transfer window. But before we get into the main bulk of this live stream, did just want to once again extend my thoughts and condolences to the family, friends, and close colleagues of Chesterfield owner Phil Kirk, who sadly, or at least his passing was announced last week. This is the first bit of anything I've really done outside of a little bits on social media since that news came through. Thought it was right just to put things on pause a little bit last week through to that Crawley Town game, where there were some really kind of heartening and emotional tributes paid to Phil Kirk in the applause before kickoff, and then in the 59th minute as well, had that moment there. So that's why there was nothing really last week. But back into the swing of things now. But just before we got going, I just want to again extend those thoughts to the Kirk family and of course Phil's family, friends and close colleagues as well. And there isn't much greater testament really to the generous backing of the Kirks and how much they've done for Chesterfield and some of the business they've done over this summer window. So that'll be the first start bit of this kind of live stream, really having a look back at what's been done so far, and then if anything does break, of course, we'll try and keep on top of that as well. So this is the signings that have been made so far, kind of mapped out on a tactics board. As said, this is the JLA tactics board, and James Orcott, one of the main kind of developers of that, has just said that if people are using it just to signpost it, more than happy to do that. It's a brilliant bit of kit if you make content like this, or you're a football content creator, or just a football kind of enthusiast in general. Really, it's a great bit of kit to have, so I'm more than happy to do that. And if you are interested, it's not kind of paid in any way, but as you said, just wants people to flag it up. So I've done that by leaving the link at the bottom of the description of this stream. But that little bit of admin out of the way, we are looking at the 10 players here that Chesterfield have signed. There is also Malik Olwalabi Belleru as well, but he is not coming in, of course, until January when his contract at Canadian side Forge FC expires. So for now, we can kind of put that one on the back burner and think about that a little bit further down the line. For now, we will focus on the 10 players and kind of run through them quite quickly. Have already given thoughts on some of these kind of when they signed, either here on YouTube or in written pieces over on Medium. And again, all various links to my other socials will be down in the description as well. But yeah, I spoke about a lot of these when they first signed, but now we've had a few games to see them in a Chesterfield shirt, see how they are actually slotting in to the side. We can kind of give some more extended thoughts. We'll do that now. Of course, starting with goalkeeper Zach Hemming, who I think has made a pretty decent start to life at Chesterfield. There has been a few kind of shaky moments, but I'm not sure necessarily that the moments that he's been caught in have necessarily been his fault. Of course, there was the penalty down at Gillingham where it looked like he got the ball, and replays certainly do show that. And in fact, the EFL then later said that shouldn't have been a penalty kick. But even there, that felt like a situation where he had to come out and make a play on the ball. He did, but unfortunately, decision went against him. And then, of course, there was the situation for the opening goal on Saturday, that 2-2 draw with Crawley Town. And I think other than having a bit of a higher starting position initially, there's not a great deal that Hemming really could have done about that. He kind of came out and pushed Harry McCurdy wide, and it was just that neither Che Dunkley or Cal McFadden could then get back and block that eventual shot. So a couple of moments there that Hemming might want to have back, but I don't think they were necessarily his fault. And in terms of the positives, he has definitely contributed in a big way, made a big save right at the end of that Crawley game with the player rushing through one-on-one, managed to kind of palm it away. And then Lewis Gordon also clearing up there to save Chesterfield a point. And he probably saved them 2 points on the opening day against Barrow as well, when Innis Cowan went racing through again. A similar one-on-one opportunity. Hemming stood up big, made a big save, and made sure Chesterfield held on. So that's 3 points there. So even if there had been a couple of, kind of, as we say, maybe shakier moments, definitely some moments where he's contributed as well. And I think he's also contributed in a distribution sense as well, with that Chesterfield have had a bit of a longer focus on their distribution at times this season. He's been very good at kind of firing those balls in for the kind of likes of Lee Bonus and Dylan Duffy to chase in the channels as well. So overall, I think a net positive start for Hemming. Not perfect, but certainly net positive, and interested to see what he brings, and certainly interested to see what the two fullbacks that were brought in can bring in Devon Tanton and Adam Lewis, because for kind of separate reasons, really, we haven't really seen a great deal of them. Of course, for Tanton, it's been due to injury. Obviously had his injury problems when he was on loan from Fulham at Chesterfield last season, and those have continued to kind of trouble him a little bit as we've gone into the early part of this season. Had a really unfortunate injury in a pre-season game out front in town, where he kind of went off the side of the pitch and by all accounts seemed to kind of catch his ankle on a water bottle. So really rough for him, particularly given the injury problems he had last season. But the kind of profile that Chesterfield were looking for, which I think Adam Lewis on the other side is too, but he hasn't quite been able to force his way into the starting 11 as of yet. We've really been kind of limited to little glimpses of him off the substitutes bench. So it'll be interesting to see what he can contribute if he does get the opportunity. And I do think over time we could well see Tanton and Lewis play quite a big role in this team, because of how narrow Chesterfield's attack is, with the likes of Armando Dobra and Dylan Markande and Ronan Darcy as well, that like to drift that little bit in field. It does feel like they could really benefit from two fullbacks and could really fly down the line, particularly where Lewis is concerned, whipping an early cross. Because if you look at his crossing numbers at Morecambe last season, yes, he played a little bit further forward, so those might be a little bit inflated, but he loves to get crosses into the box. I think those quick first-time crosses could be something Chesterfield could really benefit from, as we say, when they are looking for somebody to add that narrower threat when the likes of Dobra, Markande, etc. Drift in field. That's not a slant on Lewis Gordon at all. I think it's a very solid start to the season, if anything. But I do think Lewis maybe, just from a tactical point of view, could be a better fit. And it will be interesting to see him get that opportunity. But for now, that is a little bit of a hypothetical, because he hasn't maybe had those starting appearances as of yet. Moving into the midfield additions for Chesterfield over this summer, and the defensive midfield area was always going to be one where we saw quite a bit of activity rather, and indeed it was. A lot of players departed over the summer. Jensen Metcalf's loan from Everton ended. He is now, of course, at Bradford City. Ollie Banks and Darren Oldacre left at the end of their contracts, and then Mike Jones, who didn't play a great deal last season, in fairness, then retired. So that was four bodies really out of that defensive midfield area that departed Chesterfield at the end of last season. It needed refreshing, and it has been refreshed in quite a big way, and with some pretty big players. Ryan Sturck, of course, is gearing up to go back to his former club this weekend. Been very encouraging, I think. Very tidy on the ball, but I think the real encouraging sign is what he brings off the ball. A lot of bite, a lot of energy, a lot of ability to get up and down the pitch, which is what Chesterfield maybe lacked a little bit at times last season. He looks like he could be a very key pickup indeed for Chesterfield, what we've seen in the early stages of the season. As too does Matt Dibley-Diaz, but again, the worry is for him just to avoid injuries. That looks like it's going to be the key. Looked like he maybe aggravated that ankle issue again on Saturday. At least came off the pitch and was hobbling a little bit, and you could see kind of the coaches and physios were kind of gesturing at him to go down and not risk making that a further issue. So hopefully that was just a case of Chesterfield being cautious, not risking him because they've got the squad depth that they have, and you'd hope this doesn't become another spell that's going to force him out of games, because when he's been on the pitch, he certainly looks very, very good. In a similar way to Sturk, really, very tidy on the ball, but not a liability off it at all, willing to get stuck in, win those challenges. I think particularly at Harrogate Town, the 2-1 win, you saw that in his hour or so that he got there. He's very lively and proactive at getting on the ball. Getting kind of attacking the ball from a defensive point of view, should I say. And that is something that Chesterfield absolutely needed. And then the other one, again, in Luke Butterfield, is one that we haven't seen a great deal of. Of course, he came in initially as a trialist, having released by Everton, was very impressive, earned himself a contract, but then picked up a bit of an injury. I think he was always really going to be a bit of a squad depth signing at first anyway. So not one that Chesterfield are absolutely, it's good in the sense that Chesterfield aren't desperate for him, and it's not an area where they're light on numbers, but it would have been nice to have that little bit of depth and for him to get a chance, because he was very, very impressive in pre-season. But yeah, looks another very solid addition. But again, that is one where we're going to have to maybe withhold a little bit of judgment, just because we've not seen him kind of in full flow in competitive football yet. And now we move on to the front four, where we do know quite a bit about these players, and what we do know is largely positive. Dylan Markande, Ronan Darcy, James Berry, Lee Bonus. One option there, really very, very fluid in terms of a lot of them can occupy more than one position. But the big key is there that you've got that depth, and kind of as we set it up there, that could be in itself a very kind of natural front four, and a very, very good one at that. Of course, Dylan Markande and James Berry were both at Chesterfield last season. One of them, the former, on loan from Blackburn Rovers, and then James Berry, of course, was there permanently, departed to Wycombe Wanderers, and is now back at Chesterfield on loan for this season. So already know quite a bit about what they can bring. With Markande, of course, he came back and got a goal on the opening day of the season against Bow, but then that has drifted out a little bit and hasn't started the last couple of games. But I thought it was a pretty bright cameo from him against Crawley, and I would definitely back him to be a very significant contributor over the course of the season for Chesterfield. James Berry, haven't really seen a great deal of him yet. He already had a little bit of an injury issue that Chesterfield were aware of when they brought him back from Wycombe. But again, over the course of the season, once he gets fit and back into contention, you do wonder whether for some of these players the CFL Trophy game creates a bit of a nice avenue for them, kind of a less kind of high stakes and less intense game for them to ease their way back in, maybe get an hour or so and get back up to speed. But of course, because of naturally there's not been as much communication coming out of Chesterfield following the passing of Phil Kirk, completely understandably, it is a little bit more guesswork in terms of where some of those injury players, how they progressed in the week or so since we've had a proper press conference, and where exactly they are. But if you could get them some minutes in this game coming up against Crewe, I think that would be the ideal scenario, really. And certainly for Berry, you would hope that's the case, because if he can get back to fitness, he'll be a great asset for Chesterfield. But now we have Ronan Darcy and Lee Bonus, who are the two true new signings for Chesterfield, if you like. And I think both have been very, very encouraging. Ronan Darcy has operated right across that attacking midfield three, really. Has looked very, very good, of course. Got that great goal that went semi-viral, particularly viral for League Two standards against Harrogate Town, where he put two or three defenders down, two kind of almost in sync, really, before rolling the ball in. Very calm, very clever finish. And Darcy has looked a very calm and very clever operator for large parts of his time at Chesterfield so far. Of course, we are early days, but that's what we've got to go off so far. There. Bonus is an interesting one, because I think he has started very, very well, but I think there is also an understanding that it could be even better in terms of an output point of view. But I think in terms of what he brings to the team, it's been very, very positive. Very willing as a presser, very willing as a channel runner, puts a lot of work in, and that really is of a massive benefit to the team. It helps bring other players into play, helps Chesterfield win the ball back in positive areas. So I think as an asset for the team, he's already showing his worth. Absolutely. I think the one where you do want to see him, as we say, is just increasing the output a little bit, because he's got off the mark, he's got a goal, but there is the feeling that it probably could be 3 or 4. I think he could have got one against Bristol Rovers and probably in that Harrogate game as well. So if you can just tidy up that finishing, because he's so active and such a willing mover that he almost generates chances for himself. He's always in a position where these attacking players, these great attacking players that Chesterfield have got, can try and find him. It's just that last little bit and getting the finish to really bulk up those numbers. And if he does work on that and he starts hitting a hot streak, I think this could be one of the best strikers in League Two. I really do believe that because of what he brings to the team is so valuable. And if he can just start racking up those goals and get into a bit of a rhythm, I think Chesterfield could be on to a very good one there. And this could prove a very shrewd signing, as could all of these signings, really. Of course, there's been 2 or 3, as we've said, that have had their injury problems. But I think all the players that have managed to feature have featured in a positive way. And I think that bodes very, very well. And it's reflected in the fact that Chesterfield are so far sat second in the table and having made a pretty good start, barring that what was a real off day, Gillingham being beaten by 4-1, who are, of course, the only team above Chesterfield in the table. So, of course, they themselves are a team that deserve an awful lot of respect. And it probably puts that result into a little bit more context, really, in the fact that it's Chesterfield's only loss and it came against the team, the only team rather above them in the table. But other than that, it's been a positive start for Chesterfield, I think, for a lot of these players that we've got displayed here too. But if you look at that, you could probably tell from the way we've set these players up positionally, there is a pretty large gap at the centre-back positions. And that is not a place, as we say, but kind of excluding Oluwabi Bellewu because he is not going to be here for the first part of the year. It's not a place where Chesterfield have yet recruited. And that probably comes as a little bit of a surprise because it did look like an area where they could improve over the summer, or if not improve, just bolster in terms of numbers, really, because it is still at the moment just Che Dunkley. Cal McFadden, of course, was offered an extension to his short-term deal, initial short-term deal that brought him to Chesterfield from Blackburn Rovers. He accepted that, remained at the club. So it's him, Dunkley, and Jamie Grimes. Of course, there is Tom Naylor as well, but he's been needed in midfield at times, and it is best position. He's put in some great performances there, in the early parts of this season. So, yeah, it's like 3.5 really in terms of centre backs. So it is an area where Chesterfield still look a little bit light. And if you were thinking in terms of coming into this deadline day, and I think if you went out into the streets of Chesterfield and polled supporters, where would you like an addition? I think 90%, maybe more, would say centre back. There are other areas where they maybe could bring in an extra here or there, but centre back really does feel like the obvious one as we just move away from that screen for a bit. And there does feel like there's scope to do that because obviously one kind of consideration as we reach the end of the window is that this is then the point where clubs have to submit their squad list. That is a 22-man list of players that clubs can use in league fixtures for the first half of the season. There is then the window kind of reopens again in January, and players and clubs can then submit a refreshed list for the second half of the year. That does exclude goalkeepers, that 22 list. For Leagues 1 and 2, at least, it's slightly different for the Championship. But for Chesterfield, it's the League 2 rules that, of course, we are concerned with. There's 22 players, excluding goalkeepers and excluding players under the age of 21. Now, in terms of what classifies as an under 21 player, that is any player born after the 1st of January 2004. That is available. You can go and have a look at it on the EFL's handbook. You have to scroll quite a way through it, but I went and double checked it before we start this live stream because I think I may have had it down at 2005 at one point. So apologies for the minor error there. But I went back and double and triple checked it before this live stream. It is the 1st of January 2004, which means that Devon Tanton, for example, will be classed as an under 21 player because he was born, I think, on the 3rd of January 2004. I know he's very, very close to that. That's why he would be classed as under 21, for example, and Matt Dibley-Diaz, who is 21 at the moment, will not because he will turn 22 before the end of 2025. So having put all that into context, where does that leave Chesterfield in terms of their numbers? And quite handily, there is one place left. If you were to just not think, because what Chesterfield did last season, for context, for those who either, I know it's a long time ago, or for those of you that are just tuning in as a neutral, Chesterfield actually left some places blank and some players unregistered. So there is the scope that maybe they'll view some of these players as players they want to move on, either on loan or permanently, and choose not to register them and leave the spot free. But for now, if Chesterfield were just to register everybody that they've got that would need to be registered, I think this is about where they're at. Again, if you do spot anybody that is not on this list, then do please, of course, give me a shout, let me know. But I have, again, tried to double and triple check this. I think Chesterfield up to 21 players, including Connor Cook, because last year his name kind of cropped up and people were a little bit unsure as to why. by the sounds of it, it's because of there is kind of an EFL stipulation that you have to have at least one player, homegrown player, listed within your squad, or you can basically, as basically a punishment, if you don't have that, you can name one sub less or something like that. So assuming that follows over, we've put Connor Cook in there, and then, of course, all the other players. I'm not going to go through that list because it will be quite a lengthy process. But again, if you want to scan through that list, and if there's anybody I've missed, do let me know. But that should be where Chesterfield are at, of course, excluding the two goalkeepers in Hemming and Boots, who are not classed who are not classed as part of this squad list. And then Devon Tanton, who, as we've established there, is born after that under-21 cut-off, so will not have to be included. That leaves Chesterfield with one spot. So if they want to go out and sign this left-sided, maybe pacier, younger centre-back, that's certainly maybe the profile that people are looking for. And just logically, taking kind of any personal preference or fans' preferences out of it, they bought in Oluwabi Bellewu from January onwards. So that suggests that it's a type of player that Paul Cook and Danny Webb and the recruitment team want within their squad. So you would assume that it's a player that they would quite like to have in their squad between the period between now and Oluwabi Bellewu arriving. So could that be where they allocate that one spot again? I've been trying to keep up with my notifications as I've been reading through this. Haven't seen anything as of yet. Just having a quick scroll through. No, if I missed anything again, of course, do let me know. But could that be where Chesterfield choose to allocate that spot? Of course, it could be that they sign somebody like Tanton who falls under that kind of cut-off bracket, and they could, of course, not have to be counted towards the squad list. But essentially, this is to say that Chesterfield do have the freedom to bring in, for the next 2 and a bit hours, anyone they want. Well, within reason, of course. They've got to get a bit accepted and etc. But they can bring in anyone they like, any age, from anywhere, kind of transfer, loan, whatever. And they can put them in the squad, and it won't affect too much. That won't be kind of based on having to force somebody out the door or leave somebody out the squad. So they have still got that freedom for the next 2 and a bit hours. Of course, if they don't, then they do have the option of bringing in a free transfer, as they did last season. For example, John Fleck joined, I think it was in September. If you leave that spot open, you can then add, but what you can't do is then take players out unless there are some extreme circumstances, of course, like we saw with Mike Jones, who suffered the season-ending injury. They submitted that evidence to the EFL and said, can we register him? They said yes, on the condition that he's not allowed to be re-registered for the rest of the season. But barring that, you can't take a player out, but what you can do is add a player to a spot which is free. So Chesterfield could choose to leave that spot open to bring a player in there. That is something they could do. I mean, again, we've not had any great kind of updates on the likes of Genoa Donati and Tyrell Williams, for example, of course, 2 players that could play centre-back. They have done in their careers. They were kind of listed as being kind of under negotiation in the retain list. Of course, both kind of battling back from pretty serious injuries, and particularly in the case of Williams, a very serious injury. So again, there haven't been many updates given in terms of exactly where they are and whether Chesterfield are kind of considering offering them an actual deal to bring them back into the squad, if you like. That could be an option potentially if they do decide that they're a little bit light. But again, we are kind of verging into the hypothetical there, so I would walk that back a little bit. But it is a potential option if they leave that spot free. But basically, all of this is to say, if Chesterfield want to bring a player in there, which I think a lot of supporters would be happy with, they do have the freedom to do so. So maybe something to keep an eye on. And one final thing we're just going to discuss is not a potential outgoing, but something that kind of was rumoured, but it tends to crop up at some point in every transfer window. Apologies if you can hear the rain battering on the window. It has just started absolutely bucketing it down where I am. But something that tends to come up in every window is interest in Armando Dobra. And lo and behold, about a week or so ago, we did start seeing some clubs. It was a long list of clubs potentially linked towards Dobra. Since then, we've not really seen by any accounts any great moves towards that. But I thought we'd just kind of discuss that a little bit, because Dobra is a brilliant player. I think that there's no denying that. I think the only frustration is a little bit that his output could be even greater. A bit like Bonus, really. He's a great player, but could his output take another jump? But if you look at where he's at this season so far, just got a few numbers written down here. And these are numbers. I have to thank Ali Maxwell, the Not the Top 20 podcast, for this, because he mentioned the numbers that are over on the Opta Analyst website that are great kind of data to dive into when you're looking at this sort of thing. And I had a look, and Dobra ranked 7th for all players in terms of non-penalty expected goals. So shows that he's getting in those goal-scoring positions a hell of a lot. And if you take strikers out of that equation, he is actually second behind only Connor Thomas of Crew Alexandra. So a player that is getting into very threatening positions. And not only is he getting into those positions, he's also converting that into goals at a decent rate, because his XG currently stands at 2.18 for those first opening 6 games of the season. And he's actually scored 3 goals. So he's overperforming slightly as well. So not only is he getting in good positions, almost more commonly than any other player in League Two. Of course, that does also account for Chesterfield being a side that create a lot of chances, but it does show what a great kind of partnership the Paul Cook system and Paul Cook and Armando Dobra really are. So I can absolutely understand why there might be interest there from other clubs. I think if Chesterfield were to lose him, again, doesn't sound like there's been any great movement on that in terms of kind of a concrete deal or anything like that, but certainly can understand why he might be on club's radar. But it would be a pretty big blow for Chesterfield to lose him at this stage, but it doesn't look like that is going to happen. So did just want to flag that up again, just as another talking point to pass some time as we potentially waited for anything to come through. But again, it doesn't look like anything has moved as we now tick towards 2.5 hours to go before this transfer deadline slams shut for the summer. So yeah, I think that about covers everything I wanted to in terms of kind of what I had pre-planned for this live stream. I want to talk about the signings Chesterfield have made so far, which I think as a contingent have been very, very good. I think there's still more to come from some of those players. I think when Tanton gets back from injury, when Berry gets back from injury, maybe Adam Lewis forces his way into the team as that kind of true overlapping fullback who's going to whip those crosses in and give Chesterfield that little bit more width and stretch the pitch and allow them to maybe create some more chances, because they made a solid start to the season. But I think there is still a couple of gears that Chesterfield could shift through. Could Lewis help with that, being that kind of additional creator for a wider position, potentially? And of course, again, as we discussed, could Lee Bonus take a real jump, kind of start converting a few more of these chances and produce and kind of turn what has been some great play for the team into some great numbers on a personal level. So I think all that says that Chesterfield have started well, but they've got a lot of potential, and a lot of that has been afforded by the very solid business they have done this summer. But would that business be rounded off very, very nicely on the final day with the addition of another centre-back? This is where I'm going to talk personally. I try and kind of keep things objective and stick to the facts and look at things as they are. But for one time only, I'll offer an opinion. And yes, I think their business would be wrapped up very, very nicely if they could bring in a centre-back in the remaining hours of this window. Of course, if there are some free agent targets that they're looking at, there is no rush with that. They have still got time. But I think it would be a reassuring thing for Chesterfield to do to bring in another centre-half. Not necessarily in terms of a quality issue, just in terms of numbers, really. I think one more, and that would leave with a very, very balanced squad across all positions. And centre-back is probably the one area where you can maybe say that's not quite the case at the moment. So one more option would be very, very nice. And again, as I said when we were kind of discussing this section of the live stream, we've seen that Chesterfield are planning for that, in the sense that Oluwabi Bellewu is coming in January. It suggests that they want a player in that mould in their squad at some point, and it feels like one that they could also benefit from now. Then when Oluwabi Bellewu comes in, he's going to be coming in the Canadian season. I think their end of season playoffs end in November, so that's a pretty lengthy spell that Oluwabi Bellewu is going to be kind of not in action for. So essentially, he's almost going to be coming back kind of at the start of a pre-season in January. So do you want to have to chuck him in straight away if that's the kind of player you want? Maybe not necessarily. Maybe you'd rather have the kind of security of another option. As I just see Danny Webb's pre-match stuff for the Crew game tomorrow has come out. I will try and have a quick sift through that, see if anything in terms of transfers is discussed on there. Of course, all this is happening in real time. The kind of it's a video rather than the written form. I have to have a look back through that. If anything happens, of course, once I've ended this live stream, I will try and discuss it on Twitter. But back to the point about Oluwabi Bellawoo. I think he's a player and a profile at Chesterfield. I think it's good that they've got that secured. But for the meantime, and also the kind of the first maybe 2 or 3 months of his settling in period, moving over from Canada, of course, getting back up to speed because of when their season ends and how that works. I think it would be a good thing to have another player who's been kind of a part of the squad available to play there. And if Chesterfield could do that, I think it's a very, very good window. I think calling it a perfect 10 is always risky. If they got a left centre-back, I'd be quite happy to put it at 9.5 because I think it has been very, very good. Right now, it's probably maybe an 8.5 or a 9 because they've not got that last player in there. So if they could just get that last bit of business done, I think that would round things off very, very nicely. And as we now do tick under 2.5 hours to go, that's the one thing I'll personally be keeping an eye on. I'm sure a lot of Chesterfield fans will be as well. So we've done just about half an hour again of things I kind of had pre-planned to talk about. I will now open up the floor for maybe a couple of minutes while I just have a quick sift through kind of what I potentially missed in the last half hour or so, just doing that bit. Wait for any questions if there are any from the comments below and the chat rather. See whether they come in and then we'll wrap things up. As I say, unfortunately, I can't stay right on until 7 o'clock when the deadline closes just because I've got some other things to do. But as I've just said there, if anything does happen in the remaining couple of hours of the window, you can probably find my thoughts on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on all those places. Links, of course, down in the description. And if there are any signings for Chesterfield, hopefully we'll get an introducing piece out later in the week. Also planning to do a piece just while I'm here on the Crawley game. Maybe not an exact debrief, just in terms of how things are working. But as I say, really enjoyed sifting through those kind of Opta stats for Chesterfield's start to the season and noticed some interesting things there. So I might just do a more general look back at the first 6 games, how Chesterfield have started, how the numbers look from all of that, and that might come out also later in the week. So yeah, just got to take a minute now, just to pause for a little bit, just to have a catch up on what's happened in the last half an hour or so since I went live. And if there are any questions for the next few minutes, please do feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise I'll head off in a couple of minutes. So that is the plan for the next couple of minutes. And yeah, fire away with any questions in the chat. Okay, I just conducted a quick sweep of the places where I've been trying to keep an eye on whether Chesterfield are going to do anything. Nothing as of yet, it doesn't seem, but of course, still a couple of hours ago, and things can move very, very quickly. Of course, often dominoes waiting to fall into place, so we'll have to wait and see what the final couple of hours of this window hold for Chesterfield. But thank you, all of you, for tuning in to this live stream. As I say, it would be great to stop on until 7, until the window closes, but unfortunately, have got to shoot off. But thank you for all of you who have joined me over the past half an hour or so. We'll try and get more of these live streams kind of pre and post match going forward. But as I say, just over the past week or so, just thought I'd kind of it was the right thing to do to let things sit after the passing of Phil Kirk. But hopefully over the next few weeks, have a few more streams like this. But thank you very, very much for joining me today. And as I say, we'll hopefully see you very, very soon. Of course, if there is any late news from Chesterfield. You can find my reactions to that on my socials, which are in the description. But other than that, that is it for now. Thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you soon. So thank you very, very much. One last time. Goodbye.